The Story of King Arthur and His Knights by Howard Pyle. Part 2. The Winning of a Sword. Here beginneth the story of a certain adventures of Arthur after he had become king, wherein it is told how, with great knightly courage and prowess, he fought a very fierce and bloody battle with a certain sable knight. Likewise, it is told how he achieved, in consequence of that battle, a certain sword so famous and glorious that its renown shall last as long as our speech shall be spoken. For the like of that sword was never seen in all the world before that time, and it hath never been beheld since then, and its name was Excalibur. So, if it please you to read this story, I believe it will afford you excellent entertainment, and will, without a doubt, greatly exalt your spirit because of the remarkable courage of which these two famous and worthy knights displayed when they fought together that famous battle. Likewise, you shall find great cheer in reading therein of the wonderful marvellousness of a certain land of faery into which King Arthur wandered, and where he found a lake of enchantment, and held converse with a mild and beautiful lady of that land, who directed him how to obtain that renowned sword aforementioned. For it hath given me such pleasure to write these things that my heart would, at times, be diluted as with a pure joy. Wherefore, I entertain great hopes that you also may find much pleasure in them, as I have already done. So I pray you to listen unto what follows. Chapter 1st. How there came a certain wounded knight unto the court of King Arthur, how a young knight of the king's court sought to avenge him and failed, and how the king thereupon took that essay unto himself. Now it fell upon a certain pleasant time of the springtime season, that King Arthur and his court were making a royal progression through that part of Britain which lieth close to the forest of Ersk. At that time the weather was exceedingly warm, and so the king and court made pause within the forest under the trees in the cool and pleasant shade that the place afforded. And there the king rested for a while upon a couch of rushes spread with scarlet cloth. And the knights then present at the court were Sir Gawain, and Sir Owain, and Sir Kay, and Sir Pelleas, and Sir Bedivere, and Sir Caradoc, and Sir Geraint, and Sir Baldwin of Britain, and Sir Constantine of Cornwall, and Sir Brandiles, and Sir Mador de la Porte. And there was not to be found anywhere in the world a company of such noble and exalted knights as these. Now as the king lay drowsing, and those worthies sat at cheerful converse together at that place, there came, of a sudden, a considerable bustle and stir upon the outskirts of the court. And presently there appeared a very sad and woeful sight. For there came thitherward a knight sore wounded, and upheld upon his horse by a golden-haired page, clad in apparel of white and azure. And likewise the knight's apparel and the trappings of the horse were of white and azure. And upon his shield he bore the emblazonment of a single lily flower, of silver, upon a ground of pure azure. But the knight was in a very woeful plight, for his face was as pale as wax, and hung down upon his breast, and his eyes were glazed, and he saw naught that passed around him, and his fair apparel of white and blue was all red with the blood of life that ran from a great wound in his side. And, as they came upon their way, the young page lamented in such wise that it wrung the heart for to hear him. Now as these approached, King Arthur aroused cried out, Alas! What doleful spectacle is this which I behold? Now hasten ye, me lords, and bring succour to yonder knight. And do thou, Sir Kay, go quickly and bring that fair young page hither, that we may presently hear from his lips what mishap hath befallen his lord. So certain of those knights hastened at the king's bidding, and gave all succour to the wounded knight, and conveyed him to King Arthur's own pavilion, which had been pitched at a little distance. And when he had come there, the king's children presently attended upon him, albeit his wounds were of such a sort he might not hope to live for a very long while. Meantime, Sir Kay brought that young page before the king, where he sat, and the king thought that he had hardly ever seen a more beautiful countenance. And the king said, Prithee, tell me, Sir Page, who is thy master, and how came he in such a sad and pitiable condition as which we have just now beheld? That I will so, lord, said the youth. Know that my master is entitled Sir Miles of the White Fountain, and that he cometh from the country north of where we are, and at a considerable distance from this. In that country he is the lord of 7 castles and several noble estates. Wherefore, how thou mayst see, he is of considerable consequence. A fortnight ago, being doubtless moved thereunto by the lessons of springtime, he set forth with me for his only esquire, for he had mind to seek adventure in such manner as beseemed a good knight who would be errant. And we had several adventures, and in all of them my lord was extremely successful, for he overcome 6 knights at various places and sent them all to his castle for to attest his vow unto his lady. At last, this morning, coming to a certain place situated at a considerable distance from this, we came upon a fair castle of the forest, which stood in a valley surrounded by open spaces and level lawn, bedight with many flowers of divers sorts. There we beheld 3 fair damsels who tossed a golden ball from one to another, and the damsels were clad all in flame-coloured satin, and their hair was the colour of gold. And as we drew nigh to them, they stinted their play, and she who was the chief of those damsels called out to my lord, demanding of him what he wanted and what was his errand. To her my lord made answer that he was errant in search of adventure, and upon this the 3 damsels laughed, and she who had first spoken said, "And thou art in search of adventure, Sir Knight? Haply I may be able to help thee to one shall satisfy thee to thy heart's content." Unto this my master made reply, "I prithee, fair damsel, tell me what that adventure may be, so I might presently essay it." Thereupon this lady bade my master to take a certain path, and to follow the same for a distance of a league or a little more, and that he would then come to a bridge of stone that crossed over a violent stream, and she assured him that there he might find adventure enough to satisfy any man. So my master and I wended thitherward as that damoiseau had directed, and by we came upon a bridge whereof she had spoken, and lo! beyond the bridge was a lonesome castle with a tall straight tower, and before the castle was a wide and level lawn of well-trimmed grass, and immediately beyond the bridge was an apple tree hung over with a multitude of shields, and midway upon the bridge was a single shield, entirely of black, and beside it hung a hammer of brass, and beneath the shield was written these words in letters of red: "Whoso smiteth this shield doeth so at his own peril." Now my master, Sir Miles, when he read those words, he went straightway to that shield. Seizing the hammer that hung beside it, he smote upon it a blow that rang like thunder. Thereupon, as an answer, the portcullis of the castle was let fall, and there immediately came forth a knight, clad all from head to foot in sable armour, and his appearance and the trappings of his horse and all the appointments thereof were likewise entirely of sable. Now when that sable knight perceived my master, he came riding swiftly across the meadow, and so to the other end of the bridge. And where he had come, there he drew rein and saluted my master and called out, "Sir Knight, I demand of thee why thou didst smite that shield. Now let me tell thee, because of thy boldness, I shall take away from thee thine own shield, and I shall hang it upon yonder apple tree, where thou beholdest all those other shields to be hanging." Unto this my master made reply, "That shall not do unless thou mayst overcome me, as knight to knight." And thereupon immediately he dressed his shield and put himself into array for an assault at arms. So my master and this sable knight, having made themselves ready for that encounter, presently drave together with might and main, and they met in the middle of the course, where my master's spear burst into splinters, but the spear of the sable knight held, and it pierced through Sir Miles, his shield, and it penetrated his side, so that both he and his horse were overthrown violently into the dust, he being wounded so grievously that he could not arise again from the ground whereon he lay. Then the sable knight took my master's shield and hung it up in the branches of the apple tree, where the other shields were hanging, and thereupon, without paying further heed to my master, or inquiries as to his hurt, he rode away into his castle again, whereof the portcullis was immediately closed behind him. So, after that he had gone, I got my master to his horse with great labour, and straightway took him thence, not knowing where I might find our bridge firm, until I came to this place, and that, my lord king, is the true story of how my master came by that mortal hurt, which he hath suffered. "By the glory of paradise," cried King Arthur, "I do consider it great shame that in my kingdom, and so near to my court, strangers should be so discourteously treated as Sir Miles has been served. For it is certainly a discourtesy for to leave a fallen knight upon the ground, without tarrying to inquire as to his hurt, how grievous it may be. And still more discourteous is it for to take away the shield of a fallen knight who hath done good battle." And so did all of the knights of the king's court exclaim against the discourtesy of that sable knight. Then there came forth a certain esquire attendant upon the king's person, by the name Griflet, who was very much beloved by his royal master. And he kneeled before the king and cried in a loud voice, I crave a boon of thee, my lord king, and do beseech thee that thou wilt grant it unto me. Then King Arthur uplifted his countenance upon the youth as he knelt before him, and said, Ask, Griflet, and thy boon shall be granted unto thee. Thereupon Griflet said, It is this that I would ask. I crave that thou wilt make me straightway knight, and that thou wilt let me go forth and endeavour to punish this uncomely knight, by overthrowing him, and so redeeming those shields which he hath hung upon that apple tree. Then was King Arthur much troubled in his spirit, for Griflet was yet only an esquire and altogether untried in arms. So he said, Behold, thou art yet too young to have to do with so potent a knight as this sable champion must be, who has thus overthrown so many knights without himself suffering any mishap. I prithee, dear Griflet, consider and ask some other boon. But young Griflet only cried the more, A boon! A boon, and thou hast granted it unto me. Thereupon King Arthur said, Thou shalt have thy boon, though my heart much misgiveth me, and thou wilt suffer great ill and misfortune from this adventure. So that night Griflet kept watch upon his armour in a chapel of the forest, and in the morning, having received the sacrament, he was created a knight by the hand of King Arthur, and it was not possible for any knight to have greater honour than that. Then King Arthur fastened the gold spurs to Sir Griflet's heels by his own hand. So Griflet was made a knight, and having mounted his charger, he rode straightway upon his adventure, much rejoicing and singing for pure pleasure. And it was at this time Sir Miles died of his head, for it is often so that death and misfortune befall some, while others laugh and sing for hope and joy, as though such grievous things as sorrow and death could never happen in the world wherein they live. Now that afternoon King Arthur was waiting with great anxiety for word of that young knight, but there was no word until towards evening. Word come carrying to him certain of his attendants, proclaiming that Sir Griflet was returning, but without his shield, and in such the guise that it seemed as though a great misfortune has befallen him. And straightway thereafter came Sir Griflet himself, sustained upon his horse by the one hand by Sir Constantine, and upon the other by Sir Brandiles. And lo, Sir Griflet's head hang down upon his breast, and his new fair armour was all broken and stained with blood and dust. And so woeful was he of appearance that King Arthur's heart was contracted with sorrow to behold the young knight in so pitiable a condition. So, at King Arthur's bidding, they conducted Sir Griflet to the royal pavilion, and there they laid him down upon a soft couch. Then the king's children searched his wounds, and found that the head of a spear and part of the shaft thereon was still piercing Sir Griflet's side, so that he was in most woeful and grievous pain. And when King Arthur beheld in what a perilous state Sir Griflet lay, he cried out, Alas, my dear young knight, what hath happened to thee to bring thee upon such a woeful condition as this which I beheld? Then Sir Griflet, speaking in a very weak voice, told King Arthur how he had fared, and he said that he had proceeded through the forest until he had discovered the 3 beautiful damsels where the page of Sir Miles had spoken, and he said that these damsels had directed him as to the manner in which he should pursue his adventure. And he said that he had found the bridge up whereupon hung the shield and the brazen maul, and that he had there beheld the apple tree full of shields. And he said that he smote the shield of the sable knight with the brazen mail, and that the sable knight had thereupon come riding out against him. And he said that this knight did not appear of a mind to fight with him. Instead, he cried out to him with a great deal of nobleness that he was too young and too untried in arms to have to do with a seasoned knight. Wherefore he advised Sir Griflet to withdraw him from that adventure ere it was too late. Notwithstanding this advice, Sir Griflet would not withdraw, but he declared that he would have to do that with the other knight in sable. Now at the very first onset Sir Griflet's spear had burst into pieces, but the spear of the sable knight had held and had pierced through Sir Griflet's shield and unto his side, causing him grievous wounds whereof he suffered. And Sir Griflet said that the sable knight had then most courteously uplifted him upon his horse again, albeit he had kept Sir Griflet's shield, and had hung it upon the tree with the others that hung there, and had then directed him upon his way, so that he had made shift to ride thither, though with great pain and dole. Then was King Arthur very woe and greatly disturbed in his mind, for indeed he loved Sir Griflet exceedingly well. Wherefore he declared that he himself would now go for to punish that sable knight, and for to humble him with his own hand. and through the knights of his course strove to dissuade him from that adventure, he yet declared that with his own hand he would accomplish that proud knight's humiliation, and that he would undertake the adventure, with God his grace, upon the very next day. And so disturbed was he that he could scarce eat food that evening for vexation, nor would he go to his couch to sleep. But having inquired very narrowly of Sir Griflet where he might find the Valley of Flowers and these three damsels, he spent the night walking up and down his pavilion, awaiting the dawning of the day. Now, as soon as the birds first began to chirp and the east brightened with the coming of the daylight, King Arthur summoned his two esquires, and, having with their aid donned his armour and mounted a milk-white war-horse, he presently took his departure upon that adventure which he had determined upon. And indeed it was a very pleasant thing to ride forth in the dawning of a springtime day. For then the little birds do sing their sweetest songs, all joining in one joyous melody, whereof one may scarce tell one note from the other. So multitudinous is this pretty roundelay, that do the growing things of the earth smell the sweetest in the freshness of the early daytime, the fair flowers, the shrubs, and the blossoms upon the trees. Then doth the dew bespangle all the sward with an incredible multitude of jewels of various colours. Then is all the world sweet and clean and new, as though it had been fresh created for him who came to roam abroad so early in the morning. So King Arthur's heart expanded with great joy, and he chanted a quaint song as he rode through the forests upon the quest of that nightly adventure. So, about noontime, he came to a part of the forest lands whereof he heard of those several times before. For all of a sudden he discovered before him a wide and gently sloping valley, adown which ran a stream that as bright as silver. And lo, the valley was strewn with all those infinite multitudes of fair and fragrant flowers of divers sorts. And in the midst of the valley there stood a comely castle, with tall red roofs and many bright windows, so that it seemed to King Arthur that it was a very fine castle indeed. And upon a smooth green lawn he perceived those three demoiselles, clad in flame-coloured satin, of whom the page of Sir Miles and Sir Griflet had spoken. And they played at ball with a golden ball, and the hair of each was of the hue of gold. And it seemed to King Arthur, as he drew nigh, that they were the most beautiful demoiselles that he had ever beheld in all his life. Now as King Arthur came on to them, the three ceased tossing the ball, and she who was the fairest of all demoiselles demanded of him whither he went, and upon what errand he was bound. Then King Arthur made reply, "Ha! Fair lady, whither should a belted knight ride upon such a day as this, and upon what business, other than the search of adventure, such as beseemeth a knight of proper strength and of heart and frame would want to be errant?" Then the three demoiselles smiled upon the king, for he was exceedingly comely of face, and they liked him very well. "Alas, Sir Knight," said she who had spoken before, "I prithee be in no such haste to undertake a dangerous adventure, but rather tarry with us for a day or two or three, for to feast and make merry with us. For surely good cheer doth greatly enlarge the heart, and we would fain enjoy the company of so gallant a knight as thou appearest to be. Yonder castle is ours, and all this gay valley is ours, and those who have visited are pleased, because of its joyousness, to call it the Valley of Delight. So tarry with us, fellow, and not be in such haste to go forward." "Nay," said King Arthur, "I may not tarry, fair ladies, for I am bent upon a venture of which ye may wot right well, when I tell ye that I seek the Sable Knight, who hath overcome many other knights and have taken away their shields. So do I pray ye of your grace for to tell me where I may find them." "Grace of heaven!" cried she who spake for the others, "this is certainly a sorry adventure which ye seek, Sir Knight, for already in these 2 days have 2 knights essayed with that knight, and both have fallen into great pain and disregard. Nevertheless, and thou wilt undertake this peril? Yet shalt thou not go until thou hast eaten and refreshed thyself." So saying, she lifted a little ivory whistle that hung from her neck by a chain of gold, and blew upon it shrilly. In answer to this summons there came forth from the castle 3 fair young pages, clad all in flame-coloured raiment, bearing among them a silver table covered with a white napkin, and after them came 5 other pages of the same appearance, bearing flagons of white wine and red dried fruits, and comfits and manchets of fair white bread. Then King Arthur descended from his war-horse with great gladness, for he was both hungry and athirst, and seating himself at the table with the damsels beside him, he ate with great enjoyment, discoursing pleasantly all the while with those fair ladies, who listened to him with great cheerfulness of spirit. Yet he told them not who he was, though they greatly marvelled at who might be the noble warrior who had come thus on to that place. So, having satisfied his hunger and thirst, King Arthur mounted his steed again, and the three damsels conducted him across the valley a little way, he riding upon his horse and they walking beside him. So by and by he perceived where was a dark pathway that led into the further side of the forest land, and when he had come thither, the lady who addressed him before said this to him: "Yonder is the way thou must take if thou wouldst enter upon this adventure. So fare thee well, and may good hap go with thee, for sith thou art the knight most pleasant of address, who hath come hitherward for this long time." Thereupon King Arthur, having saluted those ladies right courteously, rode away with a very great joy of that pleasant adventure through which he had thus passed. Now, when King Arthur had gone some ways, he came, by and by, to a certain place where charcoal burners plied their trade. For here were many mounds of earth, all asmoke with smouldering logs within, whilst all the air was filled with the smell of dampened fires. As the king approached this spot, he presently beheld that someone was towards that was sadly amiss. For, in the open clearing, he beheld 3 sturdy fellows with long knives in their hands, who pursued one old man, whose beard was as white as snow. And he beheld that the reverend old man, who was clad richly in black, and whose horse stood a little distance, was running hither and thither, as though to escape from those wicked men. And he appeared to be very hard pressed and in great danger of his life. "Prithee," quoth the young king himself, "here, sirs, is one in sore need of succour." Whereupon he cried out in a great voice, "Hold, villains! What would you be at?" And therewith set spurs to his horse and dropped his spear into rest and drove down upon them, with a noise like to thunder for loudness. But when the 3 wicked fellows beheld the armed knight thus thundering down upon them, they straightway dropped their knives, and with loud outcries of fear, ran away hither and thither until they escaped into the thickets of the forest, where one upon a horse might not hope to pursue them. Whereupon, having driven away those wicked fellows, King Arthur rode up to him who he had succoured, thinking to offer him condolence. And behold, when he had come nigh to him, he perceived that the old man was the enchanter Merlin. Yet whence he had so suddenly come, who only had a little while before been at the king's court in Carlion, and what he did in that place, the king could in no wise understand. Wherefore he bespake the enchanter in this wise: "Ha, Merlin, it seemeth to me that I have saved thy life, for surely thou hadst not escaped from the hand of those wicked men, had I not happened to come hitherward at this time." "Dost thou think so, lord?" said Merlin. "Now, let me tell thee that I did maybe appear to be in danger, yet I might have saved myself very easily if I had of a mind to do so. But, as thou sawest me in this seeming peril, so may thou know that a real peril, far greater than this, lies before thee, and there will be no errant knight to succour thee from it. Wherefore I pray thee, lord, for to take me with thee upon this adventure that thou art set upon, for I do tell thee that thou shalt certainly suffer great dole and pain therein." "Merlin," said King Arthur, "even an I were to face my death, yet I would not turn back from this adventure. But touching the advice thou givest me, meseems it will be very well to take thee with me in such peril lies before me as thou sayest." And Merlin said, "Yea, it would be very well for thee to do so." So Merlin mounted upon his palfrey, and King Arthur and he betook their ways from that place in pursuit of that adventure which the king had undertaken to perform.